Welcome to Top Custom Hearthstone Cards of the Week, where unfortunately I did miss a video last week due to personal reasons, but to make up for it, today's video will be a double feature where I take a look at cards from the last 2 weeks, and hopefully going forward I can get back more on track. But I have a lot of unique and interesting cards this week, so let's get right into it. The first card this week is Fiery Glaives. It is a 5-mana 2/2 legendary Demon Hunter weapon with Wind Fury and Battle Cry. If this breaks a weapon, gain its stats. And first off, this is super unique because there hasn't been an effect like this in the past where a weapon is influenced by the previous weapon before it. So that's a really cool effect. You know, this weapon's scaling with how strong the previous weapon was. But I don't think giving Demon Hunters Wind Fury is a good idea. And I feel like this card is just asking for trouble. So in terms of, creativity and how unique the card is, A+, super cool card. In terms of balance, I think it's very bad. I think I would remove the Wind Fury and maybe add something else to make up for it. Or if you want to keep the flavor of it, maybe remove the Wind Fury and add the ability to attack unlimited times, but you can't attack the enemy hero. So you could, get a really big weapon that you can keep clearing the enemy's board with, but you can't actually attack their face with. But like I said, really unique design. I would really like to see something like this in the game. And right when I saw the card, I was actually really surprised that there isn't something like this in the game already. For the next card, we have actually a very similar effect. It is Edge of Temptation. It is a 3-mana 3/2 rogue weapon that has Battle Cry. If this destroyed a weapon, draw a card for each durability it had. And funny enough, these were made by different people, which is funny because they have a very similar effect, being influenced by a weapon that they break, which, as I said, is very unique. It's something like that hasn't been in the game before, and this one specifically seems like a very rogue effect. If anything, it might be a little slow. It's kind of funny because the last card I thought was very strong, and this card seems a little bit weak. Worst case scenario, it is a 3-mana 3/2 weapon that draws you 1 card, which isn't the worst, but it's also not very good. But say you dagger up the turn before and don't swing, this would be a 3-mana 3/2 that draws you 2, which, we're getting a little bit better direction at that point. And like I said, it's a very rogue effect. So I think it's super funny that 2 different people came up with a very similar effect that hasn't been in the game before. As I said, this seems like an effect that could and should be in the game. I think it's very unique, and it's a cool take on weapons. So yeah, A+ design there. For the next card, we have Forest Protector Baer. It is a 1-mana 1/2 legendary druid minion with Battle Cry. Until the end of your next turn, your hero has +1 attack. And I've talked about it in a previous video, but I think the act of getting attack on your opponent's turn is super unique. There's no cards right now officially in the game that give you that effect. There is some combos that can give you that effect, and it's always a very interesting situation where your opponent may not want to attack into you because you will damage their minions on their turn. And it's a mechanic I like to see them explore more. It seems like it could be a druid effect for sure. The only kind of negative or downside I have with this card is I feel like it doesn't need to be a legendary. It is a very cool effect, but I don't think it's so unique or strong that it needs to be on a legendary minion. I could just see this on a regular, rare or epic card, and it would be fine, I think. But like I said, I think the idea of having attack on your opponent's turn is such a big, untapped design space that I'd really like to see them explore. For the next card, we have Focus Fire. It is a 2-mana mage spell that says deal 2 damage to an enemy and fire your hero power at it. And I've shown some cards like this in the past where it's just so clean and simple, you can picture it in the game. Some custom cards are super wacky and introduce new mechanics and new ideas, and there's very out there. And then you have cards like this that are just very clean and simple to the point where you can see them in the game. And I really like this one. Essentially at its worst, it is a 2-mana 3 damage, which is pretty standard at this point, but it has the ability to scale with your hero power or interact with other cards that deal with your hero power, which Mage has a number of those. So I would be willing to bet that we see a card very similar to this in the game at some point. So great design. Next up, we have another mage card. It is Omega Rune. It is a 2-mana location with 1 durability that says it starts closed and deals 3 damage to all enemies. And we're continuing the trend of very unique effects in this video because there isn't any location that starts closed like this. I think it's a really cool idea that for the cost, it's a very strong effect, but it starts closed, so you can't get that effect right away. I think it's a really neat design. So you're essentially paying 2 mana for a delayed board clear that you don't necessarily need to use the next turn, right? This could just sit on the board and kind of threaten the opponent and maybe scare them to committing to the board too much. But this is just such a unique take on locations that I love. I really like making locations a little bit stronger, but delaying their effects even more. So again, I could see us having a very, very similar card to this in the game at some point, which I think is a testament to just good custom card design. For the next card, we have the Chosen Palafin. It is a 4-mana 3/4 legendary paladin minion that has Taunt and Battlecry, light a bonfire that can restore your hero to full health. And the bonfire is a location with 4 durability that says nothing happens, but then the death rattle is to restore your hero to full health. So essentially, you're paying 4 mana for a 3/4 taunt and a very delayed way to restore your hero to full health, which I'll be honest, I think it's too delayed. If I had any criticism for this card, I think it's just too slow. You know, because the location you can only use every other turn, essentially this would take you 8 turns to get the full effect, which I think is incredibly slow, especially in modern Hearthstone. So if anything, I could see the durability maybe reduced to 3 instead of 4. I could see the minion itself maybe reduced to 3 mana instead of 4. I just think 8 is too slow, and maybe shortening it to 6 or 7, something like that, would be more in range of, you know, modern Hearthstone strengths. Or another idea I had was just leave it as is, but instead of the location doing nothing when you trigger it, maybe add a slight effect. Like maybe every time you trigger it, it restores 3 health to your hero or something like that. So even though it'll still be slow, it will get you a little bit of health along the way. But once again, this card showcases another very unique mechanic that's not in the game presently, and that is a death rattle on a location. I think the idea of a location having a big payoff as the final trigger is a really cool idea, and again, something I could totally see in the game at some point. Also, the idea of just having a location that does nothing and then has a big payoff is really cool as well. So all in all, a lot of cool ideas with these cards so far, and this card is no exception. For the next card, we have Aura Borealis. It is a 9-mana legendary paladin spell that says recast all auras you've played this game and they are permanent. And I have to say, this feels like a legendary effect. You know, getting all of your auras back and making them permanent, this feels like a big splashy legendary spell, so I think it totally earns the rarity in that regard. But the only criticism I have for this one, I would say, is it almost in some ways maybe seems a bit too powerful, specifically with recasting multiple auras. You know, there's some auras, like say Crusader's aura maybe, where I feel like if you were to get 2 or 3 permanent copies up, that would just maybe be too strong. So if I had to change anything, it would maybe just to recast a single copy of the auras you've played this game. So, you know, depending how many auras you've played, you might get 2, 3, 4 instead of, you know, multiple copies of different ones. But I have to say, I am a big fan of cards that permanently alter a match. So I'm a huge fan of this card, and as I said, it feels like a legendary effect. For the next card, we have Goldmine. Lots of locations in this video, which is kind of on theme with Perils in Paradise just coming out, but this is a 2-mana rogue location with 3 durability, and it just says, get a coin. This just feels like a rogue card. It's very simple, very clean. And it's a little tough because I feel like it's a little too weak possibly, but I feel like at 1 mana it would be too strong. So I think a compromise to maybe make it a bit better would be to add a reopening effect. So the Perils in Paradise locations have situations where they can be reopened early, and I think that could be applied to this card. You know, maybe every time you play a card or every time you play a coin, it reopens and you can kind of trigger it faster. But all in all, this seems like a very rogue card. I could see this played in different, you know, Miracle Rogue decks possibly. I could see it played in Wishing Well Rogue, obviously, which is more of a meme deck, but still. But locations are still a very new mechanic overall, and there's still so much untapped design space there that I'm really happy to see people exploring it more in the custom Hearthstone community. For the next card, we have another location. It is Fishing Tournament. It is a 2-mana shaman location with 3 durability that says dredge. After you draw a card, reopen this. And I've talked about this before, but dredge is an A-tier mechanic to me. I think dredge was so successful, so flavorful, and I would love for it to come back. So pretty much any custom card that has dredge, I will pick it. So if anyone's watching that makes custom cards, throw dredge on whatever cards you make and you might get into this video. But once again, just super clean, simple design. You know, it basically gives you multiple turns of card filtering, and because this has the effect of reopening when you draw a card, you can actually use this every turn, because at the start of your turn, you will draw a card, it'll reopen. So absolute worst case scenario, this is 2 mana to dredge for your next 3 turns, which I think is fine. You know, for like a slower shaman deck, like a Reno shaman deck, I would be more than happy to play a card like this. And once again, this just kind of fits in the theme of this video of cards that I can 100% see in the game. And if they do bring Dredge back, I think someone like this could and should be in the game. And for the last card this week, we have Azalina Arch-Thief. It is a 7-mana 3/3 legendary neutral minion. With start a game, replace your hand, deck, and hero power with a copy of your opponent's. And I have to say, this is the epitome of, like wacky Hearthstone cards, right? This is something I could see in the game. I'm actually surprised it isn't in the game. But funny enough, the most recent edition of Whizbang, Splendiferous Whizbang from Whizbang's Workshop, where at the beginning of the game you get one of his decks, there was actually a deck that was supposed to be included called the Copycat deck that had this effect. So you would have copied your opponent's deck, but apparently during development, they ran into too many issues and bugs. I think specifically when two people went against each other with the copy effect. So this was an effect they very much planned to have in the game at one point. It just didn't work out, unfortunately. But if they ever do figure it out, this is a card I could see in the game, and I would like to see in the game. If you think about dust value, right? You craft this for 1600 dust, and you can essentially play multiple tier 1 decks with this card. You just queue up on ladder, and whatever your opponent's playing, you're playing. More than likely, they're playing a good deck. So this is a cool way to explore, new cards and different archetypes, only spending 1600 dust. And I think there should be more ways in the game to explore things like that. I think there should be more ways to test decks and test new cards before committing your dust and feeling bad when the deck doesn't work out. That'll be all the cards for this week, though. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, give it a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. And other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.